This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter for MacVoices viewers and listeners. Visit MacVoices.com, look for the blue box in our sidebar, and subscribe. Welcome back to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I'm really pleased to have back with us again after way too long an absence because I've been busy. She's been busier. Tonya Engst of Tidbits and Take Control. Tonya, it's great to have you back. Man, it's been a while.
Hi, it's great to have the time to sit down and chat for a little while this afternoon. Thanks for having me.
That might be the first time anybody's ever said that to me, that it's nice to have the time. You have been one busy lady, you and the whole Take Control Tidbits crew.
That's right. We've been working on not only new books about iOS 8 and Yosemite, which everyone would probably expect that we're going to do. We've also been working on a new sort of sub-series for those new books so that we can present the information in a different way than we have in the past with the Take Control books. So that has made everything take a little bit longer because not only are we covering new operating systems, which we're used to doing, but we're working in a different format, which we're learning as we go.
So you didn't have enough to do. Now you've decided to do another series, or I think you said sub-series of Take Control books. And that's one of the first things we're going to talk about. Those are called, are they Take Control crash courses, or is it just crash course?
Well, you can call it what you like. Technically, they are a Take Control crash course, but certainly around the office, we just call them crash courses.
Okay.
So just depending on how fancy you want to get, but we consider them, part of the Take Control series in that it's all the same people, it's all the same group books, they're all sold basically the same way, and even though we're trying to do something a little different with these crash courses, I think people will still recognize that kind of Take Control flavor and style because, we are who we are.
Tonya, I'm anxious to hear about this simply because I've always looked at the Take Control books as a really terrific boiled down way to learn something, to get good practical advice on how to get up and running and be efficient and take advantage of the features of a given program or a given subject. So how is the crash course going to alter that or boil it down even more maybe?
Well, here's the thing. When we started the Take Control series, it was 2003. This was a pretty early time for when a group of people might decide to do ebooks. And we really felt that we needed to prove that an ebook could be just as good as a print book, and just as good as a print book by the standards and expectations of a print book at that time. So it would be long, it would be conversational, it would be thorough, it would be detailed, it would feel like a book. It would have all the elements of a normal book. It would just be an ebook. And we'd add some cool stuff to it to make it really make sense to be online, linked bookmarks and all this kind of stuff. But we really wanted people who were comfortable with reading books to come to this, to see that it had added features because it was an ebook, but we didn't want them to feel that they were losing anything. So we've been doing these books for 12 years. And in that time, people have moved more and more to reading on the web. Ebooks have become ubiquitous. And the world has moved on, and we felt like we're still doing exactly the same thing that we were doing 12 years ago. So we're bored with it. We think some of our readers might be bored with it, and we'd like to try something new. Also, I'm sure everyone listening to this has read one or two articles about how readers who read online don't want to read long things anymore. They want to read snackable content. And they want, something to immediately give them actionable steps and all this kind of stuff. So we have some of our books, they're 100, 200 pages long. And people say to us, well, it's great that you've got a book about how to back up your Mac or make a paperless Office or install, Mountain Lion or whatever. But if I have to read 100 pages about how to do this, I'm not doing it. So we thought that they had a point, and we wanted to address it. Plus, we found that the Take Control book when you sit down to write a book called Take Control of Something, you start to feel very deeply that to deliver on that promise, you have to tell people every last little thing they would possibly ever need to know to take complete control of something. And that can be intimidating or difficult, challenging, a pretty high bar to get over. So, what we wanted to do with this series was to take some of the books that we write, certainly not all of them, but some of them, and give us a lower bar to get over in terms of that sort of exhaustive detail. And that's not because we don't want people, readers, to have a good book. It's because sometimes the best book is the one you're actually going to read, and you don't want exhaustive detail. You want an expert to just get in there and tell you the three things you really need to know. So we're aiming this particular sub-series at particular topics where that might be particularly true, or at particular topics where the most important thing about the book is that it is available. So for something like when Yosemite ships, or now that iOS 8 has shipped, nobody wants a book in February about iOS 8. We probably could get you taking control of, we could get you taking control of iOS 8 by February, maybe January, maybe even December. We could write, the 300-page, everything you absolutely need to know, completely up to date, completely fact-checked. But we can't get you a book about iOS 8 2 weeks after iOS 8 ships, where we're going to tell you everything you could possibly need to know. It's not possible. So what we wanted to do was to find a way to create a book that would give you more of a crash course, the things you really need to know right away, and a book that we could realistically complete for people while they still need to know the information. So the crash courses have far more chapters than the Take Control books. The chapters are far shorter. They take smaller bits of information and they just kind of plunk them down in front of readers like a magazine or a website, a collection of articles that work together really nicely. And because we have kind of a more shallow outline, a broader and more shallow outline, there's quite a bit less development that has to go into thinking about how the book will all hang together. So that makes the books faster to create. It also makes us more nimble if Apple introduces an important new feature or leaves out an important feature that we were expecting them to include.
This makes perfect sense, Tonya, and I love the idea. I completely understand. Having talked to a lot of Take Control authors over your 12 years of publication, I know how much effort goes into these books, which is one of the reasons that makes them such gems. But it also introduces time because you just have to have time to test out a lot of this stuff. So having something a lot more immediate and maybe a lot more pertinent to at least getting up and running makes a lot of sense.
Right. And then another thing that we put into this new series, which we've actually been wanting to do for years, but it was much more practical with the series because the chapters are very short. A typical chapter is 2 pages. Is that we are going to be publishing a version of the book as kind of a mini website. So each chapter of the book will be available on the web as an independent web page in the book.
Okay, you got to do that again. So if let's just be from a practical standpoint, I buy one of these crash course books.
Yes.
I'm buying an ebook that is a document that I can download and take with me.
Yes.
But it's also a website?
Yes. So It's an experiment, but what we wanted to do was to make it so that the ebooks can be more discoverable. So more people can find them and come and read them. So when you buy the ebook, you will get the PDF, the EPUB, and the Mobi Pocket for your Kindle. They're all basically the same, but they're, the common ebook formats. We have gone to a 2-column layout in the PDF, which we're very excited about because this finally lets us do something we've just always wanted to do, which is to have the text of something we're talking about in the left-hand column, and then to put a graphic that relates to the text immediately to the right of it. This is considered to be a very good way to present information from the standpoint of teaching people, and it lets people move their eyes back and forth really quickly from what they're reading about to what they're seeing. And we can achieve that in the PDF layout. A huge challenge, though, is what happens when you do this in the PDF to your other formats, the EPUB and the Mobi Pocket. Those books are reflowable, so no matter what the size of your screen, the text flows along nicely so that you don't have to be constantly zooming and scrolling as you would with a 2-column layout. So we have figured out some really super fancy macros that break apart that 2-column layout that we're writing into and stick everything in the most logical place possible, and then create the 1-column layout for the EPUB and the Mobi Pocket. So people who are familiar with reading the Take Control books, those EPUBs and Mobi Pockets look very similar to what they're already getting. People who use the PDF, which you can do in iBooks, even though the iBooks also supports the EPUB, the PDF works just fine there. We'll have this really super great 2-column layout, which we're really excited about. So that's what you get when you buy the book. The website version, we're still going back and forth on some of the implementation details, but basically, if you just want to read one chapter on the web, it's going to be pretty good for you. And so what this means for people who buy our book is if they get to a particular chapter and they think to themselves, whoa, my boss ought to read this, my girlfriend ought to read this, my husband ought to read this, my colleagues ought to read this, we actually have social sharing buttons embedded into the bottom of each chapter. So they will be able to tweet the chapter, Facebook the chapter, Google Plus the chapter, or link in the chapter to anyone they want, or email it, and those people will receive a URL to that one chapter on the web. So that way they can share information that they're excited about, just like sharing a New York Times article or just anything else on the web. So once you're reading the book on the web, however, it's kind of like the first one's free. So you could read the whole book on the web. I think it will end up being a pretty painful experience. It's difficult for us to create this because we like to give people a really good experience when they read things on the internet. But we will be inserting some interstitial advertising between chapters. So if you start trying to click around or start trying to get a little clever with the URL so you can read the whole book, you're going to have to work for it.
Okay.
And if we find that too many people are not working hard enough, we'll make it more annoying. So what we're hoping is that people will come to it on the web, they'll read 1 or 2 chapters, they'll either be satisfied, that's all they needed anyway, in which case we have just made the universe a better place, or they'll say, whoa, this is really cool, I want to support these people and I buy the book so I can read the whole thing in a reasonable way. And in particular in the PDF, I want to read it with this like extra super good layout. So that is what we're trying, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it will go just the way I've described. If it turns out that it's not really working, we will not do the website anymore.
Okay, so at least in theory, well, not in theory, in fact, the entire book is going to be on the web if you know where to go to look. And if you don't mind the interstitials, you'll be able to see the whole book there.
Right. But you will mind the interstitials.
But you will mind the interstitials. Okay. Okay.
You will not like those interstitials. You'll read a chapter or 2. That's no problem. And you'll get a nice sample. So like if you're searching in Google for help with something, one of our chapters might come up and you could go read it and that would work okay. But if you're like, oh, this is a great book, I want to read the whole thing, it will be double, just as annoying as trying to read, a book on Amazon, which you can sort of do if you're really persistent sometimes. But
okay. Interesting idea. Interesting way to approach it. And I love the shareability of this, because the information, the way you're talking about it, the kind of information you're going to be presenting is exactly the kind of thing that it would be great to share. That if somebody calls me and says, I'm trying to figure this out, it's like, well, I can try to tell you, or I could just give you this URL to this book, or this chapter more accurately, to go read that. And since each chapter is only going to be about 2 pages long, that makes it a very consumable, what you call it,
Snackable. Yep.
snackable piece of
People
information.
don't want meals. They don't want feasts. They don't want any of this, big chunks of content apparently on the internet. What's just really popular is a snack.
Okay.
So we're just trying to break that out for people.
Yeah. I want to take us off on a side note here for just a second. Folks, I want you to go back and pay attention to what Tonya said. The effort that she and the Take Control crew put into delivering this information in the best format, and not being satisfied with just saying, hey, it's good in iBooks and that's what it's built for, or it's good in PDF and that's what it's built for. They go to a lot of trouble trying to support every single format out there so you can get it and enjoy it the way it was intended to be. And I think that's really interesting, because a lot of magazines, a lot of books, a lot of publishers demand that you use their format, whatever that format is. So I that's always been a hallmark of what you do, Tonya, and I think it's kind of amazing the way the trouble you take.
We keep on working on it. The formats themselves, the PDF, which has the fixed layout, which just is what it is. It's meant to mimic a printed page, and then the more modern EPUB and Mobi Pocket formats that are just meant to flow along on whatever size screen you have. There's really quite a lot of back end magic that goes into trying to create one piece of text that can fairly quickly look good in both of those formats, and we keep working on it and learning more.
Interesting. All right, so this is obviously has been in the works for a while. And so you had the privilege, responsibility, whatever, of authoring the very first crash course.
That is correct. Because I'm the editor-in-chief of this whole thing, and because it was really my vision. I mean, Adam, my husband and co-publisher, and a couple of the other more frequent writers, we all got together at Macworld Expo and kind of put the thing together. But I think it's safe to say that this is more or less my baby, as far as the person who just said, this is going to happen. I'm going to push and push and push until it happens. And I'm going to get Adam and Joe Kissel. Actually, Joe did a huge amount of work on the macros. I'm going to get them to do this. And then I'm going to persuade 3 authors who are not me to also write books in this new format. So I've been really pushing. And so to lead off and to, as some companies will say, to eat my own dog food, to solve all the problems. I did write a short book all by myself in this new format, and that book scratches a particular itch that I've wanted to scratch for a very long time, and it's a somewhat unique book. And that book actually is free. So all parts of it are free. The PDF is free, the EPUB is free, the Mobi Pocket is free, and the version on the web is free. And since it's all free, the version on the web is very pleasant to read. There's nothing annoying about skipping from chapter to chapter. That may change temporarily in the next week or two, because we may need to use my book to experiment with making it annoying, so that when we publish the first other book, that book can be working correctly. But if something like that were to happen, it would just be temporary, because we're just playing around with it, and it's not going to happen this week for sure. So the book that I wrote is a book that is almost like a lot of books that have already been written. So what it's almost like is just a basic book that explains basically how to use a Macintosh. Just a basic introduction. Those books, I feel like there's no reason to write another book like that, because it's been tackled hundreds, if not thousands of times, and people keep on tackling it. And it's perhaps a more interesting book to write when you're newer in your career as a technology person. I think that for me, it would not be that interesting of a book to write, and I probably wouldn't get it right, because I've been doing this for so long that it's hard for me to fully appreciate just what a person might get stuck on. And I also think that those books are extremely difficult to write well. They're not hard to write badly, but they're hard to write well because I think for a lot of people who are struggling with just the basic fundamentals of how to use their computer, that part of why they're struggling is often because they're coming at it from a somewhat unique, non-standard worldview. And so when they read directions or they see an interface, it doesn't make sense to them. That's why they're struggling. But the reason it doesn't make sense to them is because there's something rather special and unique about their worldview that causes it to not make sense. And that special or unique thing isn't necessarily the same special or unique thing that the other people who are confused are going to have going on for them. So it's very hard in one book to figure out how to take a group of special readers with special problems and help them all figure it out in, one set of directions. That's why I think for people who just really struggle and don't feel confident on their computers and feel like they need a lot of basic help, I think courses or one-on-one instruction is really probably the only way they're ever going to get it, honestly. So I feel like there's a couple of reasons not to write quite that basic book. But this book does cover some very basic ground, but it does it in a really unique way, which is what this book tries to do is to be sort of an interpreter between the person who just needs basic help and the tech writer. So it's doing a lot of helping people understand what the heck the tech writers are talking about. So there's a lot of, if you are trying to read an article on the web or a book about how to navigate your Mac's menus or how to use the menu bar or how to get into system preferences, how can you understand what the tech writer wants you to do? So it's like directions for reading the directions.
Okay.
So does that make sense at all to you?
Yeah, I think so. In working with people in our user group, sometimes that it's difficult to get down to that level, and the idea of maybe trying to create those frames of reference that you and I have as part of our DNA now. It's not even like we learned them; they're so deeply ingrained. But a lot of these folks come to it just brand new and don't have that. And so I can see this as being that's a very interesting and valuable approach, I think.
So, right. Well, I hope so. So the thing is, like as a tech writer, I have to be able to tell people like to go to the menus at the top of their computer screen and click on them. Right. But I'm not going to every single time I write it in a 200-page book say like, take your mouse, glide it up to the top of the screen. That thing at the top of the screen is called the menu bar, just by the way. Oh, and look, there are words and icons in the menu bar. So we're looking for an icon kind of over near the right-hand side. And when you get there, click on it. I can't put all that in or we would just never get anywhere. So most writers have conventions and shortcuts that they take. But if you don't know what those conventions and shortcuts are, it's like, you don't have the magic ticket to get in at all. You're just completely shut out. So a good chunk of this book just goes over some of that basic stuff. And there's a lot of nice basic tips in there, but it's not trying to be thorough. So for instance, I don't really say anything about how to use the dock. So, and that's because honestly, if it was a book that just covered Mac basics, you'd have to cover the dock. Like how could you not cover the dock? It's very basic. It's right there. It's easy to use. It's great for new users. But you almost never get directions that rely on being able to customize your dock. Doesn't come up. So that is not in the book. However, there are topics on how to copy, cut, and paste, because tech writers are all the time telling you, oh, just copy this and paste it over here. But if you're like, I don't know what that is, you're stuck. Or what if you read, oh, just Command C it?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. And my hope is that, like for your typical MacVoices listener, I don't think that you need to read this book because you don't know what Command C is. And you probably don't need to read this book because you don't know how to enter something on the command line, although I do explain that. Because sometimes tech writers just say, oh, enter the blah, 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 blah command on the command line in terminal, and you're supposed to know like what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Just finding the terminal can be a challenge. Yeah.
So I've got a chapter on how to find system preferences. I've got a chapter on how to figure out if you're in the Finder or not. How to figure out what application you're in the first place, how to get a file out of your downloads folder, just stuff that people seem to get stuck on. I mean, tech writers, whenever they want you to download a program from the internet, they can't insert a 2-paragraph how to cope with your downloads folder sidebar in there every time. So I'm just trying to boost up what tech writers may not really have room to say in their own snackable bit of content, right?
Yeah, and the more I think about it, Tonya, you're right, and your examples are spot on. You say, well, Command C it or terminal or whatever, and people just give you this blank look, like
eye roll.
Yeah, you're speaking a foreign language. So
anyway, to get back to what I was trying to say 5 minutes ago, for your typical, MacVoices listener or viewer, I don't think for the most part you need to read this book. You might find a tip or two, but you probably have it under control. But this is so if you are trying to explain something to somebody else, you could say, you know what, you might get a lot of benefit from reading this particular chapter or article or web page, whatever you want to call it, and here's the URL, and hear it and go read it. And then you yourself might not have to explain, for instance, what's path syntax? What does the little tilde in the path mean? Where's your home folder? Where's your desktop? There's just a lot of things that you get frustrated trying to explain if you are more adept, but you're trying to help people who are less. So the inspiration for this, like, how did I figure out what stuff I wanted to write about, you might ask, is, well, we've been doing take control books for a dozen years. Every single book starts with this section called Basics. And Basics has a list of 3 or 4 or maybe 10 or 12 paragraphs, which basically go through some of these topics, just the topics that we felt would be most pertinent for this particular book. We have a huge collection of them that we keep in a file on our server so that authors can sort of pick and choose the ones they want at the start of their book. And we update them as different authors may customize them in different ways for their particular book. But honestly, we were getting kind of bored with them. I mean, we've been putting them in books for the past 12 years. So on the one hand, we hope that the people who already have a lot of our books already know this stuff. And then for someone who doesn't already have a lot of our books, we worry that they may not be long enough to really help someone who really needs fundamental assistance. So what we can now do, because they're on the web as nice, snackable chunks of content, is anytime in any of our books, we want to explain to someone, how to use the downloads folder, how to get to the invisible user library folder, all these things. We have a nice URL that we can use, and they can go read about it on the web if they need that advanced instruction. Or rather, that fundamental instruction. And our hope, honestly, for this particular book is that anybody who needs to impart this information, if they don't want to type it up themselves, can just send people over to read a chapter or two. So that is the inspiration behind this book. And now in the Take Control books, we have severely cut our basics section. We don't have to do it anymore. We just link over to this. I
was going to say, that's what you'll be doing, is referring them to the Read Me First book.
Yeah. And what we can do, for instance, if a book, we would maybe previously put something in Basics, but it was really more pertinent to a particular chapter. Now we can just put a little URL right where the person reading the book would most need to see it. So we're hoping that therefore we can spend more time focusing on the more advanced content actually in the book and less time on bootstrapping people who just need a little extra help.
I like it, and I like the fact that you are you are advancing to the point. I think you're making one assumption, and frankly, it's way overdue, and that is that people have access to online content. If they're going to be interested in this book and the subject matter, then they're going to have access somewhere that they can go to. If they really need that basic training, they can click that URL and go and get it.
Sure. And they can read it on the web. They can download the PDF if they'd prefer it in that format, all of that. So hopefully it will really help some folks out. Now, one of the things that's a little subtle, but that comes into this whole crash course series is the Take Control series overall tends to be pretty intertwinkled. We have books that have overlapping content. We have books that lean on each other. So we'll have, a book about upgrading your Macintosh to Yosemite, say. And that book perhaps needs to say something about creating a troubleshooting user account. But perhaps it shouldn't have a chapter about that because it's already 150 pages long, and a lot of readers will already know how to make a troubleshooting user account. So what that book could do is it could have, in the past, it probably would have said, oh, if you want more information, go buy this other Take Control book. Or what it might have done is sort of made a compromise and kind of squeezed in like 2 or 3 pages about making this other account. But what it can do now is it can just link to that one chapter, that one pertinent chapter that a customer might want to know about. And that person can click out of the book about, say, upgrading to Yosemite, go to the web, read this one chapter from a different book about making a troubleshooting account. Then they're done. They can return to the book that they did buy and that they are reading.
So does this mean, and I know you've been doing this for 12 years, so you have a lot of those ideas, but at the same time, there may be something that comes up. Does this mean that Read Me First might have different versions or will expand as a new topic comes up that you feel needs to be covered from a basic standpoint or a detailed standpoint?
Well, keep in mind the Read Me First book is really just meant to cover sort of communication fundamentals of communication. So when it comes to something like making a troubleshooting user account, that's not going to ever be in the Read Me First book. But a different book, a different crash course may cover it.
Got it. I see. Sorry, I missed that part. Now it makes sense.
That's okay. There's quite a lot to it, actually. So the different crash courses can now start leaning on each other in some different ways that are interesting and that should allow each book to be a little more focused.
I like that. I like that because you've now segregated information out to different places. And you're right. You don't have to include it all. You can keep me on topic unless I need to go off topic.
Right. Or we may, in a case where we might have linked out to an Apple article, now we can link out to something that we wrote, or both.
Right. Very interesting. So Read Me First is available now on the Take Control site for free. And there's some other books in the works. Is that
there are 3 more books in the works.
3 more crash
courses. And just to be clear, we're still going to be doing lots of Take Control titles. The crash courses are really good for everything you need to know about iOS 8 or any topic where there's not much of a process. So a book like Take Control of Your Paperless Office or Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac, something like that, those books have a real process that you go through. We really want you to start at A and end at Z, and we walk you through the whole thing in the book. So those books are not going to work well broken up into little mini 2-page chapters, and we don't have any intention to stop making those books pretty much the way we always do. But where the crash courses shine is for what's called day and date books, which is a book that you at least attempt to put out on the same day that a new version of the operating system comes out. So the 3 books that we're doing, we have iOS 8, a Take Control crash course. That book is available for sale right now as a pre-sale. We were unfortunately not able to finish it day and date with Apple's iOS 8. People who buy it right now can download a 2-chapter preview. We've got 2 chapters that we wanted to share with people right away so that there's something they can dig into right away. So that's there. And then we also are pre-selling and hoping to do day and date. We have a book by Shali McFarland recently of Macworld about Yosemite. It's called Yosemite, a Take Control Crash Course. And we have Joe Kissel working on a really interesting crash course that pulls together iOS 8 and Yosemite, and as tools that we would expect a reader to have on hand. And then it looks at sharing your stuff digitally kind of in 2014. So he tackles calendars, contacts, files, photos, you name it, Joe tackles it. And probably about 80% of the book looks at an iOS 8 or Yosemite related solution, but not all of it, because we don't always think iOS 8 and Yosemite are the best choice.
Got it. So that's three that are
right. And
production.
Joe's book has a very long name. We couldn't come up with a cute name. Maybe some reader can suggest a cute name to us. It's something like, what is it? Something like Digital Sharing for Apple Users, a Take Control Crash Course, something like that. I might have the title slightly miscombobulated because there are a lot of words in it.
And it's still a work in progress, right?
Yeah, it's we're selling it right now as a pre-sale. We released Take Control of Upgrading to Yosemite, which is a classic Take Control book, a couple of weeks ago. It's got 70 pages of content in it right now. It will tell you absolutely everything you need to know to get ready to upgrade to Yosemite. And we really will do a day and date release of a new version of that book that will take on the installer and what to do after you upgrade. So, and that's just like a traditional Take Control book, which we've sold that way for like 10 years now. And so when we released that book, we announced some bundles so people could get that book and pre-order the other books, and the bundles give some very attractive pricing, which we hope will encourage people to buy them. And that also really inspires our authors. We've got Shali on the Yosemite book, Josh Senner is doing our iOS 8 book, and of course Josh on the sharing book. So when they start to see the orders rolling in, me too, Adam too, there's nothing like people ordering a book to really, really, really make you want to work on it. So
yeah. Whoops. This is exciting. I love the idea. I love what you're trying to do. The accessibility thing also is sort of a new paradigm for you, and I like that because it will allow me to share things even more than maybe I've been able to share before. So yeah, there's a lot here to think about, and I'm sure that once I get my hands on the first one or two crash courses, I will start to get into the groove of just how it's all put together and how they, like you say, they interact and they lean on each other and supplement each other.
Right. And I think if you've been reading a lot of Take Control books, you buy one of these and you're just going to be kind of like, if you get the PDF, you'll think, whoa, hopefully you'll think, whoa, super cool layout. We're trying much harder to be more visual. But I don't think that you'll find it sort of, an unfamiliar or weird experience. It'll just be like, oh, the Take Control people did something a little different. But I think if you're not too familiar with Take Control, you may find our books because they're going to get a lot more Google juice, I hope, or because a friend may introduce them to you in a way that's convenient for you. And then when you come to the book, you may say, look, they're using the same font that's used in iOS 8. Like, it's a little bit more current looking. Or you may say, well, it's kind of cool that I can, there's actually pre-made tweets in each chapter. We're being really careful with the tweets to not have them be like all marketing for the book, but to actually put a useful tip in so that a person could be like, whoa, cool tip, I'll share it with my friends. So it's definitely, in 2003, when we started this, we were so, forward because our books had, links. That was like super cool. Yeah. And now, honestly, putting social networking into a book is not especially bleeding edge as far as an idea. I mean, the idea that you would do that is not new, but actually implementing it in a book that can be, produced super quickly and and work it does not seem to quite be common yet. So I'm kind of excited about that.
I think you should be. And I love the fact that, and knowing you, I'm not really surprised that it's not going to be just a straight marketing pitch to, oh, click here, and then just somebody gets a tweet that says, I'm reading.
No,
read me
no,
first.
we're not doing that. The goal for the tip is that it should fill a hole. It should get out in the internet and do something useful and make the social sphere a better place. So if it's not doing that, either we're having a bad day or it's wrong. That's not the goal. The goal is to actually be helpful.
Take Control Books, making the internet a better place.
Something like that.
Yeah.
one tweet at a time.
One tweet at a time. Oh, well, Tonya, congratulations, first of all, on taking this on and getting the first one out the door. And
it was a lot of work.
I bet. Yeah. Well, just the conception of it and the fact that you're not just slapping something together, calling it something new and throwing it out the door. I really like. So takecontrolbooks.com. All those books you say are on pre-order. And yours is right on the front page, the Read Me First book. So go and read that first, folks. Get a sample of it, and then start looking at the other ones. And of course, don't overlook all the other Take Control books. They're all terrific. And I think if I don't own all of them, I own pretty much most of them. So, Tonya, thank you for all the work you've done, and thank you for the time to explain it to us. We're looking forward to maybe getting this back to be a little more regular thing now that your life has calmed down.
Right. Let's just get those pre-ordered books completed, and then I'm actually trying to keep my schedule kind of light for the rest of the year after that.
All right. Well, we won't hit you up too often. How's that?
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks so much. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. That's Tonya Engst of Tidbits Take Control and now Take Control Crash Courses. Go out and check them out. I think you'll like them. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at CashFly.com.